A multimillionaire CEO offered $50,000 to a complete stranger to pretend to be his wife for 30 days. And by day 15, she realized the contract had a clause neither of them had read. The one written in silence, in held glances, in the way his hand lingered on her lower back when no one was watching. Dallas Montgomery stared at the check on the marble counter of Blake Sutton's penthouse kitchen, the paper almost obscene in its crispness, in the way the zeros lined up like soldiers. $50,000. Enough to save her dying interior design business, pay off the mountain of debt her ex-partner had left her buried under, maybe even afford to keep her Bushwick studio another 6 months. "You're serious," she said, not a question, her Texas drawl sharpening the edges of each word. Blake Sutton, CEO of Sutton Global, the man whose face graced Forbes covers with the headline, "The Architect of Modern Luxury," stood across from her in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent. His jaw was cut like the skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Sharp, unforgiving, designed to intimidate. "I don't joke about contracts, Miss Montgomery. It's Dallas. And this isn't a contract, Mr. Sutton. This is insanity." She picked up the paper, held it to the December light filtering through the glass. Outside, Manhattan glittered with early Christmas decorations, the city dressed in red and gold like a woman trying too hard at a party. "You want me to pretend to be your wife, for a month, during the holidays, so your dying grandmother will change her will and let you inherit the company you already run. That's the simplified version, yes." She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "And you chose me because you're a stranger, because you have no connection to my world, no ulterior motives beyond financial necessity, because when my lawyer ran a background check, you came back clean, struggling, yes, but honest." His gray eyes tracked her face like he was reading a balance sheet. "And because you showed up to a consultation at my office 3 weeks ago pitching a redesign concept so bold my board called it aggressively unconventional." Dallas remembered that meeting. She'd walked into Sutton Global's executive floor with a portfolio and a prayer, pitching a vision for their new flagship hotel that involved reclaimed wood, local artisans, and a color palette that rejected the sterile minimalism Blake's brand was known for. They'd smiled, nodded, and never called back. "You rejected my proposal. I rejected their fear of it. I didn't reject you." He moved closer, and Dallas caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something warmer. Coffee, perhaps, or the faint trace of wood smoke from somewhere beyond this glass tower. "My grandmother has 6 months, maybe less. She built this company from nothing, turned it into a legacy. But she's old-fashioned, traditional. She believes a man without a family is a man without roots, without something worth protecting. She amended her will last year. I inherit controlling shares only if I'm married by Christmas Eve. So you've had a year to find someone real. I've had a year of watching every woman I date calculate her angle." His voice dropped, and for a moment, just a flash, she saw something human beneath the corporate armor. "I need someone who wants the money, not the name. Someone who can play the part, then walk away clean when it's over. New Year's Day, the marriage is annulled, you get your payout, and we both go back to our separate lives." Dallas set the check down. Her hands were shaking, just slightly, and she hated that he could probably see it. She'd come to New York 5 years ago with a portfolio and a dream, believing the city rewarded talent and grit. Instead, it had chewed her up, spit her out, and left her building fantasy worlds for other people, while her own crumbled. What's the catch? No catch. You move into the penthouse tomorrow. We attend family events, a few public appearances. You meet my grandmother on Christmas Eve at the Sutton estate upstate. You play the role of a woman who loves me. And on January 1st, you leave with enough money to start over. She should have said no. Should have walked out of this sterile palace of glass and steel, back to her cramped studio with its radiator that clanged like a ghost, and the skyline view that consisted of a brick wall and someone's fire escape garden. But $50,000. But the way he looked at her, not like a transaction exactly, but like a gamble he was willing to take. "I want 60, she heard herself say. Blake Sutton's mouth curved barely into something that might have been a smile. Done. Before we step deeper into this impossible arrangement, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Like this video, so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe to follow what happens when two strangers sign a contract that doesn't account for the human heart. Dallas signed the paperwork that night at Blake's dining table, a slab of black walnut that could have seated 12 but held only 2, their pens scratching in the silence like a countdown. The contract was 20 pages of legal language that boiled down to one truth. For 30 days, she would become Mrs. Blake Sutton. And as she walked out into the December cold, the check folded in her coat pocket, Dallas Montgomery made herself a promise. She would take his money, play his game, and leave without a single regret. She didn't know yet that some promises are made to be broken. Moving into Blake Sutton's penthouse felt like stepping into one of those architectural magazines Dallas used to study in college, the ones that showcase spaces so perfect they seemed uninhabitable, designed for photographs rather than living. The guest room he'd assigned her occupied the entire east wing, a bedroom larger than her studio apartment, with a walk-in closet that echoed when she opened it, and a bathroom clad in Carrara marble that caught the morning light like ice. Everything was white, gray, black, a color palette that whispered expensive restraint. "It's like living inside a museum," she muttered, unpacking her single suitcase onto a bed that could have fit 4 people. "You're welcome to change it." Dallas spun. Blake stood in the doorway, still in his suit, despite the fact that it was nearly 9 p.m. on a Sunday. Did the man ever relax? "Change what?" "Whatever you'd like. You're a designer." He gestured vaguely at the room. "Make it feel less like a museum." She raised an eyebrow. "You're giving me permission to redesign your penthouse?" "I'm giving you permission to make it look like someone actually lives here. My grandmother visits in 3 days. If this place screams confirmed bachelor, the entire arrangement falls apart." Dallas crossed her arms, studying him. In the softer evening light, Blake Sutton looked less like a Forbes cover, and more like a man carrying weight he didn't know how to set down. There were shadows under his gray eyes, and his tie was loosened just enough to suggest he'd been wearing it for 12 hours straight. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't delivered in a container?" He blinked. What?" "Food. Real food. Not whatever sad desk lunch your assistant orders." She brushed past him, heading toward the kitchen. "If I'm going to play your wife, we need to establish some ground rules. Rule 1, married people eat dinner together. I have emails. You have a refrigerator that's 90% bottled water, and a single container of Greek yogurt that expired last week." Dallas opened cabinets, found them equally barren. "Jesus, Sutton, do you even know how to boil water?" "I have a chef who comes in twice a week. Congratulations. Tonight you have me." She grabbed her coat. "There's a bodega 2 blocks down. We're going shopping. It's 9 o'clock on a Sunday. It's New York. Nothing closes." She tossed him his coat from the hook by the door. "Come on, husband. Let's see if you remember how to be human." 20 minutes later, they stood in the fluorescent glow of Sal's Market, Dallas loading a basket with pasta, garlic, cherry tomatoes, fresh basil. Blake trailed behind her like a man who'd forgotten grocery stores existed. "You realize I could have anything delivered?" he said. "You realize that's exactly the problem?" She grabbed Parmesan, real Parmesan, not the stuff in the green can. "When's the last time you did something normal? Something that didn't involve a board meeting or a contract negotiation?" He didn't answer. Back at the penthouse, Dallas took over his pristine kitchen, and Blake, to her surprise, didn't retreat to his study. He loosened his tie completely, rolled up his sleeves, and watched as she moved through the space like she owned it. "You're supposed to be helping," she said, sliding a cutting board toward him. "Chop the garlic." "I don't cook." "You do now." She handed him a knife. "Think of it as a team-building exercise." His first attempt was clumsy, the cloves crushed more than chopped. But he learned quickly, his hands, surprisingly elegant for their size, adapting to the rhythm she set. They moved around each other in the small space, and Dallas became aware of things she shouldn't notice. The way he smelled like cedar, and something darker. The fact that his voice dropped half an octave when he wasn't performing CEO. The way his shoulder brushed hers when he reached for the olive oil. "So," she said, focusing hard on the pasta water. "Tell me about her. Your grandmother." "Eleanor Sutton." Blake's knife paused. "She's formidable. Built Sutton Global from a single boutique hotel in the Catskills. Raised me after my parents died when I was 8. Taught me that legacy isn't just about money. It's about what you leave behind that actually matters. She sounds incredible. She is, and she's dying." The words came out flat, like he'd practiced saying them without feeling them. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. She has good days and bad days, but the good days are getting rarer." Dallas set down her wooden spoon. Without thinking, she touched his hand. Just briefly. Just enough to ground him. "I'm sorry." Blake stared at the point of contact, like he'd never been offered casual comfort before. "This arrangement, it's not about the money. Not really. It's about giving her peace. She wants to know I won't be alone when she's gone." "And you couldn't just find someone real?" His laugh was bitter. "Everyone I've dated in the last decade has had a strategy, an angle. They see the name, the buildings, the net worth. They don't see..." He trailed off. "You," Dallas finished quietly. Their eyes met across the kitchen island, and something shifted in the air between them. Something dangerous and unmistakable. The pasta water boiled over, breaking the moment, and Dallas lunged for the pot with a muttered curse. They ate at the dining table that was too big for 2 people, the city sparkling below them like a carpet of fallen stars. Blake took his first bite of the simple aglio e olio and closed his eyes. "When's the last time someone cooked for you?" Dallas asked. "I honestly don't remember." They talked, really talked, about her failed business partnership, his impossible board of directors, her family back in Texas, his grandmother's stubbornness. And somewhere between the pasta and the second glass of wine, Dallas realized she was laughing, and Blake Sutton was almost smiling, and the man across from her wasn't a Forbes cover. He was just Blake. "Thank you," he said as she stood to clear the plates. "For this. It's just pasta. It's not." His hand caught her wrist, gentle but deliberate. "Thank you, Dallas." Her name in his mouth sounded different than when other people said it. Softer, like he was tasting something he wanted to remember. She pulled away before her racing heartbeat could betray her. This was a contract. A transaction. 30 days, $60,000, and then they'd be strangers again. She needed to remember that. But as she lay in bed that night, in the too big room in the too perfect penthouse, Dallas Montgomery couldn't stop thinking about the way Blake Sutton had looked at her across the kitchen island. Like maybe, just maybe, she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. The next 3 days unfolded like a masterclass in pretending. Dallas transformed the penthouse with surgical precision. Throw pillows in burnt orange, and deep navy appeared on the sterile couch. A vintage Turkish rug warmed the living room's cold marble. Framed photographs, carefully curated fakes of their relationship, materialized on the credenza. She filled vases with eucalyptus and winter branches, swapped out Blake's harsh LED bulbs for warm Edison filaments, and suddenly the space that had felt like a showroom began to breathe. "It looks Lived in, Blake said, arriving home Wednesday evening to find candles on the coffee table and a throw blanket that wasn't $3,000 cashmere draped over the armchair. That was the assignment. Dallas stood back, surveying her work. Your grandmother visits tomorrow. This place needs to tell the story of two people who actually share a life. You're very good at this. The design work, I mean. I used to be. She didn't mean for the bitterness to show. Before my business partner emptied our accounts and disappeared to Portland with his yoga instructor. Blake's expression darkened. Your lawyer should have... Should have what? I couldn't afford a lawyer, Blake. That's why I'm here. She softened, seeing something almost like anger flash across his face. But not at her. For her. It's fine. I'm rebuilding. This contract helps. He loosened his tie. A gesture she'd learned meant he was thinking. After this is over, if you wanted, I could connect you with clients. Real clients. Hotels, corporate spaces. Your portfolio deserves better than Craigslist consultations. Dallas's chest tightened. That's not part of the contract. I'm aware. I'm offering anyway. She studied him. This man who'd hired her to play his wife, but was starting to feel less like an employer and more like something she couldn't name. Dangerous territory. Why are you being nice to me? Blake's smile was sad. Maybe I'm practicing for tomorrow. Eleanor has excellent instincts for detecting lies. Right. This was practice, a performance, nothing real. That night, Blake taught her the details she'd need to know. His grandmother's favorite tea, Earl Grey, no sugar. Her deceased husband's name, William. Her dog, a Pomeranian named Rockefeller who hated everyone except Eleanor. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, a careful distance between them, rehearsing their fabricated love story. We met at a gallery opening, Blake recited. You were consulting on the interior design for the event space. I spilled champagne on your dress. How romantic, Dallas deadpanned. You ruined my clothes and I swooned. You didn't swoon. You called me a clumsy corporate drone and demanded I pay for dry cleaning. She laughed despite herself. That's actually better, more believable. It's also true. That's how we actually met, 3 weeks ago, at the Sutton Global Consultation. You called my design philosophy emotionally bankrupt minimalism. Dallas froze. Wait, you built our fake love story around us? Around the truth, with embellishments. It's easier to sell a lie when it's wrapped in something real. His gray eyes held hers. You did call me emotionally bankrupt. I found it refreshing. Most people find it offensive. I'm not most people. The air between them thickened again. That same dangerous current from the kitchen 3 nights ago. Dallas forced herself to look away, to focus on the script they were building instead of the way her pulse kicked up when he said her name. So I insulted you, and you... What? Fell madly in love? I asked you to dinner. You said no. I asked again. You said no. The 3rd time, you said yes. But only because I offered to look at your design portfolio. Blake's mouth curved. Barely. You showed up with 30 pages of concepts and 0 interest in talking about anything else. I was intrigued. This is a good story, Dallas admitted. Almost sounds real. Almost, he echoed. And something in his tone made her think he wasn't entirely talking about the fabrication. Thursday morning arrived wrapped in cold sunshine and the kind of nervous energy that made Dallas's hands shake as she dressed. She'd chosen carefully. A cream cashmere sweater, tailored black pants, minimal jewelry. Elegant, but not trying too hard. Blake had sent over a stylist yesterday. For appearances, he'd said. But Dallas had sent her away, unwilling to become someone else's vision of what Blake Sutton's wife should look like. Eleanor Sutton arrived at 11 a.m. sharp, and Dallas understood immediately why Blake had been so nervous. The woman who stepped off the private elevator into the penthouse foyer was barely 5 feet tall, dressed in a camel coat with a silk scarf that probably cost more than Dallas's car, leaning on a carved wooden cane with the posture of someone who'd never bent to anyone's expectations. Her hair was silver, swept into a chignon, and her eyes, the same piercing gray as Blake's, missed nothing. "Grandmother." Blake moved forward, kissing her cheek with a gentleness Dallas hadn't seen from him before. "Blake." Eleanor's voice carried the faint trace of a Boston accent. "You look exhausted. Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." Those sharp eyes swiveled to Dallas. "And you must be the woman who's convinced my grandson that marriage is worth the trouble." Dallas stepped forward, extending her hand. "Dallas Montgomery, it's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Sutton." "Eleanor, please." "Mrs. Sutton makes me feel ancient." She took Dallas's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're from Texas originally. I can hear it in your vowels." "Yes, ma'am. Houston." "And you're an interior designer." Blake showed me photographs of your work, the lobby redesign proposal for our flagship hotel. Bold, unconventional. The board hated it. Dallas's stomach dropped. Yes. I loved it." Eleanor moved past her into the living room, surveying the changes Dallas had made with the sharp assessment of someone who'd built an empire on understanding spaces. She paused at the credenza, picking up one of the fake photographs. Blake and Dallas at a fictional dinner, laughing at something off camera. "When did you take this?" 2 months ago, Blake said smoothly, appearing beside Dallas with his hand settling naturally on her lower back, a casual intimacy they'd practiced but still made her breath catch. "After Dallas finally agreed to stop talking about design long enough to let me actually take her to dinner." Eleanor set down the photo. "He's lying, but you already know that." Dallas's heart stopped. Beside her, Blake went rigid. Eleanor turned, and her expression was amused. "Oh, don't look so terrified, both of you. I'm dying, not stupid." She settled into the armchair Dallas had artfully arranged with the throw blanket. "Blake, darling, I've watched you navigate hostile takeovers and international acquisitions. You're an exceptional liar when you need to be, but you're terrible at faking affection." "Grandmother," "Hush, I'm not finished." She looked at Dallas. "You, on the other hand, are either genuinely fond of my grandson, or you're the best actress I've met in 83 years. The way you look at him when he's not watching, that's not something one can fake." Dallas felt her face heat. Relax, dear. I'm not here to expose whatever arrangement you've concocted." Eleanor's smile was knowing, sad. "I amended that ridiculous will clause because I was terrified Blake would spend his entire life building monuments to success and forget to build a life worth living. If hiring you is what it took to force him to let another human being into this mausoleum he calls home, then so be it." Blake sank onto the couch, looking more vulnerable than Dallas had ever seen him. "You knew?" "I suspected. But watching you together now." Eleanor's gaze moved between them, assessing. "I don't think either of you is as clear about what's real and what's performance as you believe you are." The words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to wave away. Eleanor stayed for tea. She asked Dallas about her failed business, her family, her dreams for the future. Questions that felt less like interrogation and more like genuine interest. And when she left, 2 hours later, she kissed Blake's cheek and whispered something Dallas couldn't hear. "What did she say?" Dallas asked after the elevator doors closed. Blake stood very still, staring at the space his grandmother had occupied. She said, "Don't let this one get away, Blake. She's the first person I've seen you look at like she's real in 20 years. Dallas's heart hammered. "Blake, she's wrong. This is a contract, a business arrangement. Right, of course. But neither of them moved. They stood in the foyer of the penthouse that was starting to feel less like a showroom and more like a home, and Dallas knew, with sinking, terrifying certainty, that Eleanor Sutton wasn't wrong at all. She was falling for Blake Sutton, and she had no idea how to stop. The gala was a mistake. Dallas realized this the moment she stepped into the plaza's grand ballroom on Blake's arm, a borrowed Valentino gown clinging to her frame, cameras flashing like a meteor shower. The Sutton Global Annual Winter Charity Gala, New York's most exclusive event of the season, where CEOs and old money collided in a performance of philanthropy that was really about seeing and being seen. "Smile," Blake murmured against her ear, his hand firm on her waist. "We're on stage now." She smiled. She played the part. She let Blake introduce her to board members and investors, hotel moguls and real estate developers, every handshake another brick in the wall of their fiction. Mrs. Blake Sutton, the woman who'd somehow tamed New York's most eligible bachelor. "How did you manage it?" a woman in head-to-toe Chanel asked, her smile sharp as a blade. "Getting Blake to settle down?" "I didn't manage anything," Dallas replied, her Texas drawl sharpening instinctively. "Turns out he's a person, not a project that needs managing." Blake's hand tightened on her waist. Approval or warning, she couldn't tell. But it was the woman in the corner, watching them with the intensity of a hawk, who made Dallas's instinct scream. Victoria Ashford. Blake had mentioned her exactly once. "My ex-fiancé. It ended badly." Now Victoria moved through the crowd like a shark cutting through water, her red dress deliberate as a warning flag. "Blake." Victoria's voice was honey over glass. "I didn't believe the rumors until I saw it myself. You, married. How unexpected." "Victoria." Blake's tone was ice. "This is my wife, Dallas." "So I've heard." Victoria's dark eyes raked over Dallas with surgical precision. "An interior designer. How quaint. Tell me, Dallas, how long did it take you to learn the proper way to hold champagne at events like this?" Dallas felt her spine stiffen. "About as long as it took you to perfect that passive-aggressive smile, I'd imagine." Victoria's expression flickered. "Charming. Blake always did have a weakness for projects." "Victoria." Blake's voice dropped into a register Dallas had never heard. Pure warning. "Walk away." "Or what? You'll lecture me about boundaries? That's rich, coming from you." Victoria leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Does she know, Blake? Does your little wife know about the acquisition?" Dallas felt Blake go absolutely rigid beside her. "That's confidential corporate." "Oh, please. Montgomery Designs, small interior design firm in Bushwick, filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago. Sutton Global acquired the assets and intellectual property for pennies on the dollar 2 weeks ago." Victoria's smile was venomous. "Funny coincidence, isn't it? You hire a struggling designer to play your wife, and your company just happens to own everything she's created for the past 5 years." The ballroom tilted. Dallas turned to Blake, searching his face for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make Victoria's words a lie. But she saw it immediately. The guilt, stark and undeniable. "Dallas, you bought my company?" Her voice came out strangled. "You own Montgomery Designs?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Blake?" She was aware of people turning, of whispers starting to ripple through the crowd. But she couldn't care. "You hired me for this fake marriage, and the whole time, you owned the one thing I had left?" "I was trying to protect it. Your former partner had sold the assets to a liquidation company. They were going to strip everything, auction off your designs piece by piece. I bought the company to preserve it, to give it back to you when what? When our little arrangement ended and you could play hero?" Humiliation burned through her veins like acid. God, I'm such an idiot. This entire thing, the contract, the money, playing house, it was all just another acquisition, wasn't it? Buy the struggling designer, parade her around for your grandmother, then hand back her company like it's charity. That's not what this is. Then what is it? She realized she was shouting now, her voice echoing off the plaza's gilded ceiling. Tell me, Blake. What am I to you? A transaction? A project? A convenient solution to your inheritance problem? His jaw worked, those gray eyes storming. But whatever he was going to say died when his phone buzzed. Blake glanced down, and his face went ashen. It's the hospital. Eleanor collapsed. The world stopped. 20 minutes later, they were in Blake's car, racing through Manhattan traffic toward Mount Sinai, the gala forgotten. Victoria's bomb still detonating in slow motion between them. Blake drove with white knuckles, his phone pressed to his ear as he talked to doctors, his voice a controlled monotone that Dallas recognized now as his armor against breaking. She should have been furious. She should have demanded answers, should have walked away from this entire disaster. But when they reached the hospital, when Blake stumbled in the hallway outside Eleanor's room and Dallas saw his composure finally shatter, she found her hand reaching for his without conscious thought. She's stable, the doctor said. But it's time to consider comfort measures. We're talking days now, not weeks. Blake nodded, mechanical. I understand. Dallas watched him disappear into Eleanor's room, and the truth hit her with devastating clarity. She'd stopped playing a part somewhere between the pasta and the photographs, between Eleanor's knowing smile and the way Blake looked at her like she was the only real thing in his manufactured world. She'd fallen in love with a man who'd bought her life without asking, and she had no idea how to forgive him, or if she even wanted to. Eleanor Sutton looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, monitors beeping a steady rhythm that felt like a countdown. Dallas had meant to leave, had made it as far as the elevator before something pulled her back. Guilt, duty, or maybe just the memory of Eleanor's knowing smile. I don't think either of you is as clear about what's real as you believe you are. She knocked softly on the doorframe. Blake sat in the chair beside his grandmother's bed, still in his tuxedo, his bow tie undone, his head in his hands. You can come in, dear. Eleanor's voice was weak but alert. Blake, stop brooding. It's unbecoming. Blake looked up, and Dallas saw the devastation he'd been hiding, raw and unfiltered and absolutely breaking her heart. I should go, Dallas said. I just wanted to make sure. Sit. Eleanor patted the bed beside her. Both of you. I don't have time for whatever nonsense happened at that ridiculous gala. They sat. Blake in his chair, Dallas perched on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the IV lines. Eleanor's sharp eyes moved between them. You had a fight. It wasn't... Blake started. Don't lie to me, Blake. I'm dying. I've earned honesty. She looked at Dallas. What did he do? Dallas hesitated, but something about Eleanor's directness demanded truth. He bought my company without telling me, the design firm I built. He acquired it while you were pretending to be married to secure his inheritance. Eleanor sighed. And you felt manipulated. I felt like an idiot. Understandable. Blake, explain yourself. Blake's hands clenched. Montgomery Designs was being liquidated. Her former partner had sold the assets to a company that specializes in stripping intellectual property and selling it to the highest bidder. Every design Dallas created over 5 years was about to be auctioned off, piece by piece, to corporate chains and hotel conglomerates who'd slap her work on projects without credit or compensation. He looked at Dallas, and she saw the truth of it in his eyes. Not calculation, but desperation. I bought the company to stop that from happening. I was going to transfer full ownership back to you on January 1st, with the contract termination. along with enough capital to relaunch properly. His voice cracked. I wasn't trying to control you, Dallas. I was trying to protect the one thing you'd built that deserved protecting. Eleanor made a soft sound. And you didn't tell her because? Because it would have changed the terms, made it messy, made her question whether the contract was about the marriage ruse or something else entirely. Made it real, Eleanor said quietly. Blake's silence was answer enough. Dallas felt tears burning behind her eyes. You should have told me. I know. You should have asked me first, given me a choice. I know. Blake stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked Manhattan's glittering chaos. I've spent my entire adult life making decisions for companies, for shareholders, for people who trust me to see angles they can't. But with you, God, Dallas, with you I didn't want to be the CEO making calculated moves. I just wanted to fix something for you without it being a transaction. Everything between us has been a transaction. Has it? He turned, and the look on his face undid her. Because I can't remember the last time I looked forward to coming home. Can't remember the last time I laughed at dinner or wanted to know about someone's day or gave a damn about whether throw pillows matched the curtains. That's not transactional. That's... Blake. Eleanor's voice, gentle but firm. Finish the sentence. He looked at his grandmother, then at Dallas, and the armor finally cracked completely. That's falling in love with someone I hired to fake it. Which makes me either the world's biggest fool or the luckiest man alive, and I honestly can't tell which. The words hung in the air, impossible and terrifying and achingly real. Dallas stood, her legs shaking. You can't say that. Why not? Because we have a contract. Because this ends on January 1st. Because I'm supposed to walk away with my money and my company and pretend 30 days with you didn't... Her voice broke. Didn't completely ruin me for anyone else. Then don't walk away. Blake, I'm not asking you to stay because of the inheritance or the company or my grandmother. I'm asking because somewhere between the grocery store and teaching me how to cook pasta, you made me remember what it feels like to want something that isn't on a balance sheet. He crossed the room, stopping just inches from her. I'm asking because I'm in love with you, Dallas Montgomery. And I know that's not in the contract, and I know it complicates everything. But I won't let you leave thinking you were just another acquisition. Dallas looked at Eleanor, desperate for guidance, for logic, for anything to make this make sense. Eleanor smiled, sad and knowing. Love rarely makes sense, dear. That's what makes it worth having. But the company, the manipulation, he made a mistake, Eleanor said. A well-intentioned, arrogant, deeply stupid mistake. But look at him, Dallas. Really look. Does that look like a man who sees you as a transaction? Dallas looked. Saw Blake Sutton, not the CEO, not the Forbes cover, but the man who'd fumbled chopping garlic in his own kitchen, who'd let her redesign his sterile penthouse into something that felt like home, who'd sat with his dying grandmother and let his armor crack because pretending didn't matter anymore. I'm terrified, she whispered. Good, Blake said. So am I. She kissed him. Not because the contract required it, not because anyone was watching, but because 30 days had turned into something neither of them had signed up for, and walking away would hurt more than staying ever could. Blake kissed her back like she was oxygen, like she was the only real thing in a world built on performance and strategy. His hands cradling her face with a gentleness that made her believe, maybe, that love could be built on a foundation as shaky as a lie that had turned true. When they broke apart, Eleanor was crying softly. Finally. I was beginning to think I'd have to die before you two figured it out. Don't joke about that, Blake said roughly. I'm dying, Blake. I'll joke about whatever I damn well please. She reached for both their hands. Promise me something, both of you. Anything, Dallas said. Promise me you'll choose each other. Not the company, not the money, not what makes sense on paper. Choose the messy, complicated, beautifully imperfect thing you've stumbled into. Eleanor's grip tightened. Promise me you'll be brave enough to let it be real. We promise, Blake said, his voice breaking. Dallas nodded, unable to speak past the tears. They stayed with Eleanor until she fell asleep, her breathing steady, her hand holding theirs like an anchor. And when they left the hospital at 3 a.m., stepping into a New York winter that felt less cold than before, Blake pulled Dallas close. I'm still angry at you, she said against his chest, for not asking, for thinking you could fix everything without letting me have a say. I know. I'll spend however long it takes making that right. Good. Because if this is real, if we're really doing this, we do it honestly. No more secrets, no more calculated moves. Deal. He kissed the top of her head. For what it's worth, you were never the contract to me. Not really. You were the first person in 20 years who looked at me and saw Blake instead of Sutton Global. Dallas pulled back, meeting his eyes. And you were the first person who made me believe I could build something worth keeping. They went home. Not to Blake's penthouse, but home, to the space they'd been building together without realizing it. And for the first time since signing the contract, Dallas Montgomery let herself believe that maybe some lies were just truth waiting to be discovered. Eleanor Sutton died 4 days before Christmas. The funeral was held at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a towering monument of stone and stained glass that felt both sacred and suffocating. New York's elite filled the pews. Board members, investors, hotel magnates, society page regulars, all dressed in expensive black, performing grief for a woman most of them had feared more than loved. Dallas sat in the front row beside Blake, his hand gripping hers like a lifeline. He hadn't cried yet, hadn't broken. He'd moved through the past 3 days with mechanical precision. Arrangements, obituaries, logistics. His armor welded back into place. She was terrified he'd forgotten how to take it off. The service was beautiful, impersonal. A priest who'd never met Eleanor read platitudes about faith and legacy. Blake's cousin, a venture capitalist from Connecticut, delivered a eulogy that mentioned Eleanor's business acumen 6 times and her humanity exactly never. When it was over, when they'd filed past the casket and offered hollow condolences to family Dallas barely knew, Blake's lawyer appeared like a shadow in a tailored suit. Mr. Sutton, we need to discuss the will. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Blake's expression was granite. Fine. There's a complication regarding the marriage clause. Dallas's stomach dropped. What kind of complication? The lawyer, Richard something, with a face like a funeral home director, pulled out a document. Mrs. Sutton amended the will again. 2 days before she passed. The new version states that Mr. Sutton inherits controlling shares only if he's married to someone he loves, and I'm quoting here, with the kind of honesty that makes pretending impossible. Silence. She knew, Dallas whispered. Apparently, she always knew. Richard looked uncomfortable. The clause goes on to specify that if the marriage was initially contractual, Mr. Sutton must make a public declaration of genuine intent, essentially proving to the board and shareholders that the relationship is real and ongoing, before the inheritance is validated. Blake laughed, hollow and sharp. Of course she did. One final test. The board is skeptical. Several members saw the altercation at the gala. Victoria Ashford has been vocal about her suspicions. They're demanding proof that this marriage is legitimate before they'll honor the amended will. Richard cleared his throat. Without that proof, controlling shares revert to a trust managed by the board. You'd remain CEO in name, but every major decision would require their approval. They'd strip his authority, Dallas said. Essentially, yes. Blake released her hand, stepping away. Then I'll give them what they want. Schedule the meeting. That night, in the penthouse that had become their accidental home, Dallas found Blake on the terrace, snow beginning to fall over Manhattan like a benediction. You're going to do it, she said, not a question. Tomorrow. You're going to tell them we're real. Yes. Blake, if you do this, if you stand in front of your board and declare that you're in love with me, you're risking everything. Victoria will push back. The board will question your judgment. Investors might pull out. I know. Your grandmother built that company for you. Her entire legacy was never about the company. Blake turned, and his eyes were red-rimmed but clear. Eleanor's legacy was teaching me that empires built on fear and strategy are worth nothing if you don't have someone to share them with. She spent her entire life building Sutton Global, so I'd have something worth protecting. But she amended that will, because she knew I'd forgotten how to protect anything that mattered beyond a balance sheet.
So you're going to walk into that boardroom and choose me over the company? I'm going to walk into that boardroom and choose us over the version of myself that Eleanor was terrified I'd become. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I'm going to tell them that yes, I hired you to play my wife. And yes, it started as a contract. But somewhere between the pasta and the throw pillows, I fell in love with you. And if they can't accept that, if they think loving you makes me unfit to lead, then they can have the damn company. Blake, no. Dallas, listen to me. His voice was steady now, certain. I've spent 20 years building an empire because I thought that's what legacy meant. But you taught me that legacy is how you make people feel. It's coming home to throw pillows and candles. It's someone teaching you how to chop garlic. It's being seen, really seen, as something more than a name on a building. You're really going to do this. Risk everything. For you, yes. For us, absolutely. He kissed her, soft and devastating. Eleanor's final test wasn't about proving the marriage is real. It was about proving I'd finally learned to choose my life over my legacy. The board meeting was held in Sutton Global's executive conference room, a glass-walled space overlooking Manhattan, 50 floors above the city. Cold winter light flooding through floor-to-ceiling windows. 16 board members sat around the black marble table. Old money, new money, sharks in suits waiting for blood. Victoria Ashford sat at the far end, her smile predatory. Blake stood at the head of the table, Dallas beside him by choice, not contract. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for coming. Blake's voice carried the authority of someone who'd commanded rooms like this his entire adult life. I'm aware you have concerns about my grandmother's amended will, about the legitimacy of my marriage, about whether I'm fit to maintain controlling shares of this company. Mr. Sutton, Victoria began. I'm not finished. Blake's tone could have cut glass. Yes, I hired Dallas Montgomery to pose as my wife. The arrangement was contractual, transactional, designed to satisfy Eleanor's will clause so I could inherit the company my grandmother built. Murmurs rippled around the table. But somewhere in those 30 days, the contract stopped mattering. I fell in love with her. Not because it was strategic, not because it served the company, because she's the first person in 2 decades who looked at me and saw a man worth knowing beyond the net worth and the buildings with my name on them. This is highly irregular, someone protested. I'm aware, and I'm also aware that several of you believe loving someone, choosing someone, makes me weak, makes me compromised, makes me unfit to lead Sutton Global into the next quarter, let alone the next decade. Blake's hand found Dallas's, their fingers lacing together. So here's what I'm offering.
Accept that my marriage is real, that my judgment is sound, and that loving Dallas Montgomery makes me a better CEO, not a worse one. Or don't. Strip me of controlling shares, manage by committee, watch this company stagnate under risk-averse groupthink. You're threatening us? Victoria's voice was ice. I'm telling you the truth. Eleanor's final lesson. Blake looked directly at Victoria, his expression almost pitying. You asked me once what I saw in Dallas that I never saw in you. I see someone who challenges me to be human instead of just successful. Someone who makes me want to build a life, not just an empire. And if that's not the kind of CEO you want leading Sutton Global, then I'll step down. Today. Right now. The room erupted. Dallas squeezed his hand, her heart hammering. Blake was really doing it, sacrificing everything, publicly, for her, for them. Richard, the lawyer, stood. Ladies and gentlemen, may I remind you that Mrs. Sutton's will is legally binding. The clause requires only that Mr. Sutton prove genuine intent, which he has just done, in front of 16 witnesses. He looked around the table. The question before this board is not whether his marriage is real. It's whether you're willing to lose the best CEO this company has ever had, because he committed the unforgivable sin of falling in love. Silence. Then, surprisingly, the CFO, a silver-haired woman named Margaret, who'd worked with Eleanor for 40 years, spoke. I vote to honor Eleanor's will. Blake has earned the right to lead this company, marriage or no marriage. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to tender their resignation. One by one, votes were cast. Not unanimous, Victoria and 3 others voted no. But enough. Blake Sutton retained controlling shares of Sutton Global. And when they left that conference room, when they stepped into the elevator and the doors closed behind them, Blake Sutton, CEO, billionaire, Forbes cover, pulled Dallas Montgomery into his arms and finally cried. Thank you, he whispered against her hair, for being worth it, for making me brave enough to choose. Dallas held him, this man who'd risked his entire legacy for her, and understood. Eleanor Sutton's final gift hadn't been the company. It had been teaching her grandson that some things, love, honesty, the courage to be human, were worth more than empires. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in fresh snow and the kind of quiet that only happens when a city briefly remembers how to breathe. Dallas woke to find Blake's side of the bed empty. They'd stopped pretending separate rooms mattered 3 days after the board meeting and followed the scent of coffee to the kitchen. He stood at the counter in an old sweater and flannel pants, hair disheveled, attempting to flip pancakes with the intense concentration of a man who'd mastered hostile takeovers but still struggled with breakfast. You're going to burn them, Dallas said, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. I'm following the recipe. The recipe doesn't account for your pathological need to control everything, including pancake timing. She kissed his shoulder blade. Move over. They cooked together in the easy silence of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Blake set the table. Actual plates, actual napkins, not the sad desk lunches of his former life. Dallas poured coffee into the mismatched mugs she'd brought from her old studio, the ones Blake had initially looked at with horror before admitting they had character. Outside, Manhattan glittered with Christmas lights and fresh snow, the city softer than usual, like even New York was willing to pause for a moment of grace. Eleanor would have loved this, Blake said quietly, watching the snow fall. You, us. The way you've turned this sterile tower into something that actually feels like home. She knew, Dallas said. Before we did. That's why she amended the will again. She wanted you to fight for something real. I'm glad I did. They ate breakfast as snow continued to fall, and Dallas felt something settle in her chest. Not the anxious flutter of the past month, but a deep, steady certainty. This was real. Messy and complicated, and built on the shaky foundation of a contract neither of them had honored, but real. After breakfast, Blake disappeared into his study. Dallas spent the morning finishing the final touches on the penthouse's Christmas decorations, not the designer-perfect aesthetic she'd have chosen for a client, but something warmer. String lights, a slightly crooked tree, stockings hung over the fireplace that Blake had admitted he'd never used until she'd insisted they light it. Around noon, Blake emerged holding a folder. "I have something for you." Dallas set down the ornament she'd been hanging. "If this is another contract, it's the deed to Montgomery Designs, full ownership, transferred back to you. No strings, no conditions." He handed her the folder. "And a letter of recommendation to every hotel group, design firm, and real estate developer in New York. You're an incredible designer, Dallas. It's time the industry actually knew your name." She opened the folder with shaking hands. Everything was there. Her company, her designs, her future. Handed back not as charity, but as recognition of what she'd built. "Blake, there's more." He pulled out a second envelope. A contract, a real one this time. Dallas's heart stopped. What kind of contract? The kind where Sutton Global hires Montgomery Designs as the exclusive interior design firm for our next 5 hotel projects. Fair market rate, full creative control, your name on everything. His smile was nervous, vulnerable. "I'm not asking you to stay because of the money or the work. I'm asking because I'm in love with you, and I want to build something together. Not an empire, just a life. But I also want you to have your own career, your own success, separate from me." Dallas looked at the contract, at this man who'd learned to see her as more than a transaction, and felt her eyes burn with tears. Yes. Yes to the contract. Yes to everything. The contract, the life, the beautiful, terrifying mess of building something real with you. She kissed him, tasting coffee and hope, and the kind of future she'd stopped believing existed. "But I have a condition. Anything. No more secrets. No more calculated moves. If we're doing this, we do it honestly. Deal." Blake pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "For what it's worth, you've already given me everything that matters. The company, the inheritance. Eleanor was right. It's all just buildings and balance sheets without someone to share it with." They spent Christmas Eve the way Dallas had always imagined it should be spent, cooking dinner together, burning the roast slightly, laughing as they salvaged it with wine and creativity. They lit candles, turned on the lights strung around the living room, and danced to Nat King Cole in their socks on the hardwood floor. And when midnight struck, when Christmas Day officially arrived, Blake Sutton, CEO, billionaire, the man who'd bought her company and then her heart, pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I know we're technically already married," he said, dropping to one knee in their living room with its mismatched mugs and crooked Christmas tree. "But that was a contract. This is a choice. Dallas Montgomery, will you marry me? For real this time. No clauses, no arrangements. Just you and me and whatever beautiful chaos we build together." The ring was simple. A single diamond on a platinum band. Elegant but not ostentatious. Chosen for her, not for show. Dallas pulled him to his feet, laughing through tears. "Yes. God, yes. But only if you promise to keep learning how to cook. I refuse to spend the rest of my life being the only one who knows how to make pasta. I promise." They kissed as snow fell outside the windows, as the city sparkled below them, as the future opened up like a gift neither of them had known they were allowed to want. And somewhere, Dallas liked to believe, Eleanor Sutton was smiling, knowing that her final test hadn't been about inheritance or companies or proving love was real. It had been about teaching two people that sometimes the best things in life start as lies that become truth, contracts that become choices, and empires that become homes when you finally let someone in. This story began with a lie written on paper and ended with a truth, written in every choice that followed. It's not really about a billionaire who hired someone to play his wife, or a designer who took the money to save her dreams. It's about what happens when we stop performing the life we think we're supposed to live and start building the one we're brave enough to want. About understanding that legacy isn't measured in buildings or balance sheets, but in the people who see us, really see us, and choose to stay anyway. Blake risked his empire. Dallas risked her pride. But what they gained was something no contract could ever capture. A life built on honesty, vulnerability, and the kind of love that makes pretending impossible. If this story moved you, if it made you think about what you're brave enough to choose, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. Tell me, what would you risk for something real? And if you believe some stories don't just entertain, but remind us what it means to be courageously, messily, beautifully human, subscribe for the next journey. Because the best stories aren't about perfect people making perfect choices. They're about imperfect people choosing each other, again and again, until the choice becomes the only truth that matters.